Hey, why does every Republican sound like a feminist now?
I fought for her.
And I fought for her.
I fought for her. For her. For her. For her.
I fought for her.
For her.
We fought for her.
And President Trump
Has fought for all of us.
For us.
He fights for us.
Fought for us.
President Trump fought for me. For us.
For us.
For us.
for us, for us.
I'm so grateful that President Trump has fought for us.
Ah yes, Donald Trump, famous feminist icon. It's all in the context of demonizing trans people, specifically trans women, and it's totally consumed our politics. Welcome to Progressive Primers, a new show I'm doing while I work on bigger, more cinematic videos. This show will provide the layman with a basic overview of American politics from a progressive perspective. I'm starting this show during Pride Month, so I thought I'd make the topic of my first episode about the hot button question, should trans people have rights? Well, I don't know. I feel like since we live in a country that was founded upon the principle that we're all created equal and deserve all the same rights and liberties, and since anyone who has ever opposed rights for minorities has always been remembered as a bigot and a villain of history, it seems to me that the simple answer is yes. But maybe that's just a hunch. So let's look at a primary source, like the Constitution. The 14th Amendment says, "No state shall deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws." This basically means the government needs to treat everyone equally. Most legal experts have interpreted this to mean yes, at least some. But turns out that many of our conservative friends disagree. What are their reasons as to why not?
A trans person is confused about fundamental physical reality. You know, it is a delusion about reality.
Kids are confused enough when they're growing up. I think to add gender confusion to that, which we're doing very, very rapidly, is going to destroy 15 people for every one it saves.
It's a matter of aggressively insulting. It is. The entire discussion is whether we are embracing mental illness and delusion as a society. That's the entire discussion.
No.
Ah, yes. Trans people are just confused. It's mass delusion, a common talking point. But is it actually true? Well, as a wise man once said,
Facts don't care about your feelings.
so let's look at the facts. There is an increasingly strong scientific consensus that gender dysphoria is a real, actual, not made up condition. Gender dysphoria has been in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders since 2013. Actually, it's technically been there for longer, as the term replaced the outdated term gender identity disorder, which has been in the DSM since 1980. The scientific community largely agrees that gender-affirming care, even for minors, saves lives. Dr. Moira of the American Academy of Pediatrics said in 2022, "There is strong consensus among the most prominent medical organizations worldwide that evidence-based, gender-affirming care for transgender children and adolescents is medically necessary and appropriate. It can even be life-saving. The decision of whether and when to start gender-affirming treatment, which does not necessarily lead to hormone therapy or surgery, is personal and involves careful consideration by each patient and their family." This scientific consensus, and yes, it's a scientific consensus, this isn't just an appeal to an authority. This is the result of numerous peer-reviewed studies that found that gender-affirming care has led to significantly lower rates of depression and suicidality among people with dysphoria. It's also been found to be safe. Side effects can cause harm, but they're honestly just as harmful as some of the side effects of other elective procedures. It's also way less harmful than suicide or self-affliction, which unfortunately many untreated patients with gender dysphoria fall victim to. So when red states ban gender-affirming care to protect kids, they're actually doing the opposite. But hottie, we just want to protect kids from dangerous surgery that they'll regret. No, you don't. First of all, the reality is that it's an extremely small number of people who regret transitioning. This 2021 meta-analysis found out that only 1% of patients who undergo gender-affirming surgery regret it. That's a much lower rate than for, say, knee replacement surgery, which one study found had a regret rate of 17%. But the most common reason the study found for why people regret transitioning was not actually related to the side effects or them changing their mind about being trans. No, it was because patients had difficulty being accepted by their friends and families after they transitioned. Bigotry and social ostracization causes the most regret. And by the way, when it comes to trans kids, very, very, very few even get surgical interventions. This recent study found that only 2.1 per 100,000 minors aged 15 to 17 got surgeries. That number is even smaller for minors aged 13 to 14, at only 0.1 per 100,000. The researchers could find no data on minors under 12 getting surgery. Now, this data is from 2019, and the numbers could have risen in the years since, but even if you quintuple these numbers, we're still talking about less than 300 or 400 people. That being said, even if the number of kids getting these procedures is microscopic, which it is, we should still keep it legal, as it could be a life-saving option for a select few, and doctors should be free to recommend these procedures if they find it medically appropriate. Another point to bring up is that these state laws only prevent transgender kids from getting medical care, not cisgender kids. Plenty of kids can still get puberty blockers to prevent precocious puberty, aka puberty that occurs at a very early age. Plenty of kids can still get double mastectomies, but only to treat or prevent breast cancer. If these procedures were really that dangerous for minors, then transphobes would want to ban them for kids in all cases, not just to treat gender dysphoria. In both cases, a double mastectomy is still a permanent change to one's body, but how come in one case it's seen as a gross, mutilating procedure, and the other it's seen as a necessary life-saving treatment? The reality is that kids who get these procedures do so with their parents' expressed permission, who have their children's best interest in mind. No 5-year-old is walking into a doctor's office saying, "I feel like a girl," and walking out with a gallon of estrogen. Children generally cannot get medical care without their parents' consent. You all know this. Why are you acting like this is not the case?
As I went over in the talk, for thousands of years, human beings existed, and there was no such thing as trying to medically transition people into another gender.
This means nothing and can simply be debunked by looking at this chart of left-handedness. Obviously, when a minority group is more accepted by society, they become more visible in society. Trans people have existed throughout history. Also, Matt Walsh asks why haven't people been trying to medically transition for thousands of years? What are you talking about? For thousands of years, one of the most common medical practices to cure illness was bloodletting, slitting someone's wrists and letting them bleed out in order to rid the body of impure fluids. The day George Washington died, he woke up with a severe sore throat and had his doctors make several cuts across his body, extracting 80 ounces of blood. This procedure likely only made things worse, and the father of our country died that night in excruciating pain. Some doctors today argue that the bloodletting contributed to his death, and what Washington really had was epiglottitis, which could have been treated simply with antibiotics. We use science now in medicine. Of course, people aren't going to seek medical interventions for their gender dysphoria if they don't even know what that is. But the research isn't that new. Some of the first literature goes back to the early 20th century in Germany and was burned by the Nazis. I know a lot of people instinctively say, we should ban the procedures until they're 18 or 21, and people who say this are just basing their opinions on vibes. No, if a 16-year-old with gender dysphoria goes to a doctor, and the doctor comes to the conclusion that hormone replacement therapy would significantly improve their mental health and even save their life, and their parents go with them and consent, what's wrong with them receiving treatment? I thought you guys were all about parental rights. Why should the government get between a child, a parent, and their doctor? I thought you guys were the party of small government. I think JJ McCullough, a conservative, and my favorite YouTuber, put it best.
A lot of this kind of stuff is just, the argument is fundamentally, this is gross and weird and not normal, and therefore government should put a stop to it. And I don't know, it's just like, it would be interesting to talk to some of these families and hear their story and hear these voices, right? And not just like the most unattractive, unsympathetic case studies that we can possibly find, you know, which gets so amplified in the right-wing media, you know, people that have transitioned and regret it, you know, these kinds of things, right? Like, if you listen to, because that's what I think a lot about. It's like, you know, I was thinking about this the other day. It's like, to put yourself in somebody else's shoes is really a very important aspect of trying to have any sort of reasonable political conversation.
He's right. I know it's cringe to show empathy these days, but discussions about this issue need more sensitivity. Imagine if you felt that you were born in the wrong body and sought care that allowed you to live the way you feel most comfortable. Imagine if your fundamental right to existence and to pursue happiness by expressing your true self was being threatened by politicians because you don't conform to the way they view the world. Seems a lot like authoritarianism to me. What I think the media doesn't focus enough on is how happy trans people are once they get the care and acceptance they need.
More than 50% consider suicide.
That for me was the turning point. I didn't want to see Ryland go through that.
I'd rather have a living son than a dead daughter. And I guarantee that if we had pushed back and done what a lot of parents do, I don't think that we would have either one of the kids that you see before you here today.
Allowing him to live authentically and true to himself and be who he really feels like he is. When you get to know Ryland, you see just how proud and confident he is of himself.
This wasn't always a top issue among Republican voters. The current trans panic is very new, dating back to like 2022. See, it seemed that every summer up until then, the right was trying to find a culture war issue to garner support and distract the American people from the fact that they live in the only developed country on earth without paid maternity leave, or universal health care, or the fact that they send trillions of dollars to a Pentagon which can't pass an audit and can't account for hundreds of billions of dollars. In 2020, they fear-mongered about BLM, but most Americans actually supported the protests, so that didn't work. In the summer of 2021, the new boogeyman was critical race theory, and while it did lead to Republicans winning the Virginia governorship, it failed to gain much traction beyond that. The outrage was a fad. But by around the summer of 2022 to like early 2023, they finally figured out that if they fearmongered about trans people, they could actually get tens of thousands of working class Americans to vote for the party that bails out the rich and continually tries to take away healthcare. The fearmongering isn't just focused on banning access to gender-affirming care. Its main focus is on something very different: sports. In my opinion, the outrage against trans women in sports has been the right's most effective tool for drumming up opposition to trans visibility in general. Their rhetoric supposedly appeals to the American value of meritocracy and a weird, disingenuous feminism.
Do you think that Trump likes women? Do you think he respects them at all?
Yeah, Trump loves women. I don't know if he respects them. When we say
really?
that people
You don't
support,
think so?
No.
Why not?
I think the types of statements alone that he makes about women, I think, call that into question. But you said earlier that people support Trump because of his policies. I don't think that's true because I don't even know what policies of Trump that nobody even talks about them.
Oh, really? He posted on his Twitter, he posted that like 20 promises he's going to make to America. He's going to make trans women competing in women's sports illegal. I think that is something that needs to be said, that he does support women in that register.
Are these things are these like the most important issues to you?
I think so.
Okay.
I am a woman after all. At least I know I am.
You're competing in a lot of NCAA or whatever athletic events?
I attended San Jose State. I graduated from there. You do realize that there is a transgender person that's on that volleyball team and nobody on that team was told that there was a transgender woman on there?
I didn't know this is the largest issue in the election for you. It just seems like a pretty minor thing altogether.
I think women's rights in general is a big thing.
The idea that a real woman would lose out to winning a trophy from a biological man is often seen as unfair in the eyes of many normies. Yes, biological men and biological women indeed have inherent physical differences that make one group better suited for certain sports. This is a more complicated issue than trans healthcare, and I do think the left should take it more seriously than just saying, well, who cares about sports? But here's the thing. Most professional sports leagues have already developed rules taking these differences into account. Trans athletes generally cannot play in professional women's leagues until they've gone through at least a year of hormone therapy and have fallen below a certain testosterone level. These rules seem pretty fair to me. It's best to leave this up to individual sports leagues. But Hadi, that's not enough. Okay, but the problem with forcing trans athletes to compete only with members of their biological sex is that you're going to run into the exact same problem with trans men. This is literally what happened in Texas when Mac Beggs, a trans man who was in the process of transitioning by taking testosterone, won the state high school women's wrestling championship in 2017. Transphobes use this as an example to go, see, look, this poor, innocent girl is being beaten up by this violent trans person. Except this isn't a biological man competing against a woman. It's a trans man being forced to compete with women because Texas state law prevented him from competing with men, where he wouldn't have had an unfair advantage. This is literally the result of policies that you advocate for. You're either being dishonest or you're too stupid to understand. It would be far less dangerous for a trans woman to compete against cis women than it would be for a trans man to compete against cis women. But as usual, transphobes like to pretend that trans men don't exist. The weirdest thing is that states that ban trans athletes tend to do it at the school age level. Like, weirdly, even for elementary schools, when differences in athletic ability between men and women are far less pronounced, and when the stakes for getting scholarships and awards are minimal. Why? These laws needlessly alienate trans kids to no one's benefit. So why push them through? Well, simple. To bait Democrats into defending an unpopular position. Why is it unpopular? Republican messaging. The GOP spent $215 million during the 2024 cycle on TV advertising against trans issues, with a large focus on banning trans women from women's sports. But how many trans athletes are even out there? Well, according to Charlie Baker, the president of the NCAA, of the 510,000 athletes competing at the collegiate level, fewer than 10 publicly identify as transgender. That makes up 0.0000196078431%. No one knows how many trans athletes compete at the high school level, but it's probably also similarly low. All of this uproar for 10 people. But it doesn't matter. The constant push shifted public opinion to the right. A majority of Americans now support banning gender-affirming care for minors. There has also been an 8-point drop in support for anti-discrimination laws for trans people since 2022. 2/3 now support forcing trans athletes to compete in leagues that match their assigned sex at birth, up from 58% just 3 years ago. The anti-trans crusade got Donald Trump, a man who used to passively support trans rights, into becoming the most dangerous threat to their existence. Don't believe me? Here's him in 2015 on bathroom bills.
Do you have any transgender people working in your organization?
I don't know.
No?
I really don't know. I probably do. I really don't know.
So if Caitlyn Jenner were to walk into Trump Tower and want to use the bathroom, you would be fine with her using any bathroom she chooses?
That is correct.
Here's him now.
Gender insanity, child abuse, chemical, physical, and emotional mutilation of our youth, and so-called gender-affirming care. Ridiculous. Mutating their physical appearance, mutilation of minor youth. Can you believe this? A concept that was never heard of. Radical left. Under my leadership, this madness will end. Thank you very much.
A few months ago, Trump had a public clash with Maine's governor after he asked her if her state was going to comply with Trump's recent executive order prohibiting federal funding to states that allow trans athletes in women's sports.
But I understand Maine. Is Maine here, the governor of Maine? Well, are you not going to comply with it?
I'm complying with state and federal laws.
We are the federal law. Well, you better do it. You better do it because you're not going to get any federal funding at all if you don't. And by the way, your population, even though it's somewhat liberal, although I did very well there, your population doesn't want men playing in women's sports. So you better comply because otherwise you're not getting any federal funding.
See you in court.
Every state, good, I'll see you in court. I look forward to that. That should be a real easy one. And enjoy your life after governor because I don't think you'll be in elected politics.
Yeah, you sure showed her. How many trans athletes are competing in Maine schools? 2. All of this for 2 people. And Maine is one of the few states where we actually know how many trans athletes there are. We don't know how many there are in, say, Mississippi, but it didn't stop their governor from signing a law banning them from playing in women's sports. But hey, no big deal. It's not like Mississippi has any other problems. Why is this seemingly small phenomenon regarding 1% of the US population such a massive part of the discourse? Well, it's definitely not based on bigotry.
Tranny, tranny, tranny. I don't really care. You want penises in women's bathrooms, and I'm not going to have it.
Okay.
No, thank you.
It's
disgusting.
This is Nancy Mace, a South Carolina Republican congresswoman who has recently become obsessed with trans people. Ever since Congress got its first ever trans member, she's been trying to ban her from using women's bathrooms in the Capitol. And she succeeded. She regularly uses slurs for trans people, calls allies groomers, all in the name of protecting women's spaces. Such a feminist. Look, she even accuses Representative Connolly of mansplaining.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to be counseled by a man. over men and women's spaces or men who have mental health issues dressing as women. I'm not being counseled by some guy.
My inquiry is to
over
the
this.
chairman, Mr. Chairman.
The thing is that this is all just a grift. Nancy Mace used to be supportive of trans rights as recently as 2 years ago.
Well, I'm pro transgender rights. I'm pro LGBTQ. Just don't go to the extreme with our kids. Our kids
define extremism there for me.
Sex change surgery, the hormone blockers that sterilize our children. We shouldn't be doing that when a child is prepubescent or going through puberty. Let that child go through the natural process of life and let them make that permanent decision when they're older. Now, if they want to take on a different pronoun or a different gender identity or grow their hair out or wear a dress or wear pants or do those things as a minor, those are all things that I think most people would support. Be who you want to be, but don't make those permanent changes when it's a child.
Why'd she shift? Simple. To fundraise and get attention. It's disgusting, but why does she think that this issue will give her attention? What about this issue drives so many clicks, but more important issues don't? Simple. Discussing gender politics is way more entertaining and easier to get into than inflation or the housing crisis. Politicians use the culture war to distract you from the real issues in society that they don't intend on fixing.
It's amazing how strongly people feel about that. You see, I'm talking about cutting taxes, people go like that. Talk about transgender, everyone goes crazy. Who would have thought 5 years ago you didn't know what the hell it was?
State laws restricting the rights of trans people have been a thing before, most famously in 2016 when my home state of North Carolina passed the infamous bathroom bill, restricting trans people from using the bathroom they feel most comfortable. What made this bill different from the more recent ones was the reaction. The passage of HB 2 was met with uproar. Cities and states across the country banned their employees from non-essential travel to North Carolina. The film industry pulled out. Major sports leagues pulled out. Popular musicians canceled performances. PayPal withdrew their plans to expand in Charlotte, costing the city hundreds of jobs. North Carolina got a massive economic punishment for passing a hateful, bigoted bill. The Associated Press estimated that all in all, the bathroom bill would cost the state $3.76 billion over 12 years. And because of this backlash, the law was repealed. This is how woke we were back in the 2010s. But let me ask you a question. If HB 2 became law today, would it even make a blip? Would there be any significant backlash from corporations, celebrities, and state governments at all? Or would it just be seen as one of hundreds of bills across the country being passed to demonize and dehumanize trans people? Why aren't corporations, right now, pulling out of states that ban gender-affirming care for minors, even if their parents consent? This is worse than the bathroom bill. It's literally killing people. Something happened to the culture. It changed. The failure of this legislation is what put trans fear-mongering on the back burner of the conservative media machine for 7 years. It wasn't until they realized that if they made it about kids and sports, they could actually drum up support, particularly by asking their favorite question.
What is a woman? What is a woman?
What is a woman? Define what a woman is without reference to the word woman, please.
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can you define what a woman is?
A woman is a person who says she is.
It's every transphobe's favorite bad faith question. It's a bad faith question because their definition of a woman, XX chromosomes, is not actually useful in day-to-day life. Sure, chromosomes and reproductive physiology might be useful when determining sex, but it's useless when identifying a person on the street, because you can't see any of those things. Gender is all about presentation and expression. For example, did you know that this fitness coach, whose name I can't pronounce, is actually a trans man? You wouldn't be able to tell that unless if I told you that. He looks like a man, but he doesn't have a single Y chromosome in his body. See how this definition isn't useful? I mean, look at Blair White. She's a trans woman, but you wouldn't be able to tell that unless if I told you because of how she expresses herself. But Hottie, this isn't natural. These people look the way they do because of medical intervention. We need to use a definition based on natural things, like how God made them. Ah yes, God, who is a man, right?
All right, Parker, what is a woman?
A woman is an adult human person that has a desire to be in accordance with a particular set of social and cultural norms that are typically associated with the female sex. Now, define a man. Define a man.
You're looking at one, XY chromosomes in a
Okay, but
adult male.
does God the Father have XY chromosomes
Okay.
prior to incarnation?
We literally have a religious
He's
topic
a
later.
father and he's he/him, but he's not a man?
We have a religious
Wait, so a man is someone with XY chromosomes, but he doesn't have XY chromosomes, yet he's still a man, and he still uses preferred pronouns? But God the Father's a man, right? Because all fathers are men.
Well, first of all, there's a trinity. So God the Father is so above gender. It is so above any of our understanding.
Then why use
with
him?
Glory and understanding. Again, because you have to make a choice, either he or him or her in the original scriptures. Let's go back to. I'm happy
Some
to get into
fathers
that,
aren't men and boys.
So I'm.
So some fathers
I'm
are not men and boys, not men or boys.
I'm sorry.
Some fathers are not male.
No, of course they are. I'm not.
Wait, so God the Father's a male?
Hold on, God the Father. So where do we get God the Father from?
Opposition to trans rights will unfortunately continue to be a thing for years to come. But we shouldn't lose hope. We are on the right side of this. History is not kind to bigots. That doesn't mean we should stop fighting, but it should give us the confidence to carry on the struggle.